Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're not just easing into bed, we're stepping back in time to the foggy, gaslit streets of Georgian London. Imagine the city not as a postcard, but as a living, breathing, festering creature of stone and mud. The air hangs thick with the stench of coal smoke and horse manure, and the constant din of market traders, street criers and carriage wheels grinds on your nerves like a rusted saw. You're not a tourist here. You're living in a cramped, damp room above a tailor's shop. Your days a monotonous cycle of mending and hoping. But tonight, there's a different kind of pain. A throbbing, fiery agony in your jaw that's been stealing your sleep for 3 days straight. It feels like a small demon has taken up residence in your molar and is using a tiny pickaxe to dismantle your skull from the inside. This isn't a pain you can ignore. It's a pain that makes you want to tear your own face off. You probably won't survive this, but for now, you just need a moment's peace. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? It's always fun to see how far our little community stretches into the sleepy night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've heard the whispered remedies. Old wives' tales about chewing on clove or swishing with whiskey, but those are just minor distractions from a major torment. The pain is a relentless drumbeat against your temples, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Your hand trembles as you reach for the small brown bottle on your mantelpiece. It's not a medicine you sought out, but one that was foisted upon you. A friend, a fellow tailor whose own ailments had a distinctly liquid solution, pressed it into your hand just yesterday, promising a blessed escape. "For God's sake, man," he'd said, "this will sort you right out. A spoonful of the black drop and you'll sleep like a babe." The label is simple, unassuming. It reads laudanum, just a name, not a warning. You know it's a form of opium, but the word itself doesn't carry the same sinister weight it does today. Back then, it was as commonplace as aspirin is to us now. It was the panacea of the age, a cure-all for everything from headaches to hangovers, from fevers to melancholia. The apothecary in your neighbourhood sells it for a few shillings, a price that makes it accessible to the masses, from the wealthiest duchess to the lowliest street sweeper. It was one of the most widely prescribed and consumed medications in Georgian Britain, and historians still argue whether its widespread availability was a genuine attempt at public health or a reckless oversight that created an entire generation of addicts. You uncork the bottle. A sweet, slightly medicinal aroma fills the air, a scent a little like honey and a little like decay. It's an intriguing, almost comforting smell. The liquid is a dark, syrupy amber. It looks thick, like something heavy with promise. A teaspoon is all you're told to take, just one. You pour it carefully, the dark liquid glugging into the spoon. The small, unassuming dose seems so harmless, so utterly benign. You raise the spoon to your lips, the scent growing stronger. It tastes exactly as it smells, cloyingly sweet at first, followed by a bitter, almost earthy aftertaste that makes you grimace. You swallow, and for a moment, nothing happens. The pain in your jaw is still a blazing inferno. You wonder if you've been fooled. You sit on the edge of your bed, your heart a nervous flutter. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe you should have just stuck it out. Then, slowly, a warm tide begins to rise within you. It starts in your stomach, a gentle heat that spreads outward, seeping into your limbs. The feeling is like slipping into a hot bath after a long, cold day. The sharp edges of the world begin to soften. The incessant throbbing in your jaw, which had been a drumbeat of agony, fades into a dull, distant ache. The tension in your shoulders, which you hadn't even realised you were holding, melts away. Your thoughts, which had been a frantic, chaotic scramble, settle into a placid, calm river. This is not just relief, it's a profound sense of peace. For the first time in what feels like forever, you are not suffering. The weight of the world, the drudgery of your work, the dampness of your room, the constant struggle to make ends meet, all of it just slides off. It's like being wrapped in a warm cotton wool blanket, a cocoon of blissful numbness. A soft chuckle escapes your lips. It's a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. You lie back on your cot, the scratchy wool of the blanket suddenly feeling like the softest silk. The pain is gone. The anxiety is gone. All that is left is a quiet, hazy tranquility. You realise you haven't felt this calm, this utterly without care in years. A small part of your mind, a voice that is still clear enough to be heard, whispers a single, simple truth. This is what you've been missing. This is what you've been searching for. A peculiar tidbit about laudanum from the era is that doctors often prescribed it to calm crying babies, a practice so common they even sold it in tiny bottles for that express purpose, an early version of a terrifyingly effective soothing syrup. They called it Mother's Helper. It's a horrifying thought now, but back then it was just another part of the daily routine. Your eyelids feel heavy. The darkness behind them is a deep velvety black, more inviting than anything you've ever seen. The last thought you have before you drift off is how simple it all was. One small spoonful, one simple bottle, one blessed dose of oblivion. It's a new kind of freedom, one you feel you've been granted. You're not just escaping a toothache, you're escaping everything. And in this moment of perfect, pain-free stillness, that seems like the most wonderful thing in the world. The morning light, when it finally arrives, feels impossibly bright. A thin, sickly yellow bleeding through the grime on your window. You stir, your body a heavy, relaxed weight on the cot. The first thing you notice is the complete absence of pain. The demonic toothache, which had been your constant companion for days, is nothing but a distant, vague memory. Your mouth feels fine, your head is clear, or at least clearer than it was yesterday. This isn't just relief. It's a sense of well-being that you've never quite experienced before. It's a quiet, gentle joy. You stretch, a languid motion, and a faint, sweet scent. The aroma of laudanum lingers on your fingertips. You remember the bottle, sitting on the mantelpiece like a small brown treasure. You go about your morning routine, but everything feels different. The chores that once felt like a slog, stoking the fire, mending a pair of breeches for a customer, boiling water for your gruel, now seem almost manageable. The constant anxiety that gnaws at the edges of your mind is absent. You find yourself humming a tune you haven't thought of in years. It's a strange, almost unsettling feeling of peace. The day passes in a soft, hazy blur. You don't feel tired exactly, but you don't feel fully awake either. It's as if you're moving through the world with a thin, protective veil between you and its harsh realities. As evening approaches, that old familiar ache begins to return. It's not the searing, skull-crushing agony of yesterday, but a low, throbbing thrum in your jaw. It's a polite knock on the door, a reminder that your tormentor is waiting. You find yourself glancing at the mantelpiece. The bottle calls to you, not with a demanding shout, but with a gentle whisper. It's a promise of comfort, a return to that beautiful, quiet stillness. You hesitate for only a moment. After all, the pain is real, and the cure is right there. One spoonful. Just one. What's the harm? You repeat the ritual from the night before, pouring the syrupy liquid, holding it to your nose and taking that familiar bittersweet sip. The warm tide rises again, this time a little faster, a little more predictably. The ache recedes and the world softens once more. That night you sleep with a profound sense of security. The world outside can be as cruel and unforgiving as it likes. You have your sanctuary. This becomes your new normal. The world, once a sprawling, noisy and hostile place, begins to shrink. It's no longer about navigating the crowded streets, haggling with merchants, or enduring the endless small irritations of life. It's about the bottle. Your day is now structured around the slow, creeping return of the pain and the sweet, blessed relief of your evening dose. You start to notice the little things. How the bottle is a third full, then half empty, then almost gone. Your work, once your sole purpose, becomes a means to an end. It's just the thing you do to earn the money to buy more laudanum. Your customers complain about the quality of your stitching, a loose thread here, a crooked seam there, but you can't bring yourself to care. The finer points of a well-made garment seem utterly irrelevant compared to the deep, aching need for your nightly comfort. Historians still argue whether the addictive nature of laudanum was truly unknown at the time or simply ignored by a society desperate for an easy solution to suffering. It was, after all, a period of immense social change and upheaval. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, creating a new class of urban poor living in wretched conditions, rife with disease and chronic pain. The temptation of a cheap, effective painkiller was irresistible, and the medical establishment, lacking modern scientific understanding, was only too happy to provide it. A fringe theory suggests that some doctors suspected its addictive properties, but believed the benefits of temporary relief from a miserable existence outweighed the long-term risks. You begin to recognise the other users in the neighbourhood. They're not easy to spot, not at first. They look like everyone else. The weary washerwoman with the perpetually hunched back, the pale, consumptive clerk who coughs into a silk handkerchief, the old sailor with the stump for a leg. But you start to see it in their eyes, a certain languid hollowness, a stillness that's not quite right. They move with a quiet deliberation, a calm born not of contentment, but of submission. You exchange a quick, knowing glance with one of them, a frail, elderly woman who buys her own small bottle from the apothecary. There is no conversation, just a silent acknowledgement. You are part of a secret, unspoken society. A curious tidbit from this time is that laudanum was often a key ingredient in so-called patent medicines, proprietary concoctions sold under fanciful names like Godfrey's Cordial or Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. These were marketed aggressively to the public, promising cures for everything from colic to fever. People would consume them by the spoonful, completely unaware that they were simply drinking a solution of opium and alcohol. It was a kind of a medical Wild West, a world where the line between a miracle cure and a dangerous habit was blurred beyond all recognition. You find yourself seeking out these patent medicines as well, drawn in by the colourful labels and the promise of a potent dose, a little variety in your quest for calm. Your social life, what little there was of it, begins to wither. Friends stop calling on you. You're never in the mood to go to the pub. Conversation feels like a chore, a noisy, demanding effort that you no longer have the energy for. Your mind is on one thing, and one thing only. The slow march of the day towards dusk, towards the blessed relief of your bottle. You find yourself making excuses. I've got a headache, you say. I'm feeling a bit poorly. The excuses grow more frequent, and your friends' invitations grow less so. Eventually, they stop altogether. You don't mind, not really. The less you have to interact with the outside world, the better. It's noisy and complicated, and you have your quiet, beautiful peace waiting for you. You start to keep a better eye on your supply. You're more careful with your dosage, stretching it out, making it last as long as possible. A single teaspoon becomes a half, then a quarter. You measure the liquid with a surgeon's precision. A faint panic bubbles up when you see the bottom of the bottle nearing. The thought of a night without your comfort, without that warm, gentle embrace, is a terrifying one. It's a feeling of impending doom, of returning to that raw, exposed state you once inhabited. The world is a hungry maw, and you have only your tiny bottle to shield you from its teeth. You start to feel the first tendrils of dependency taking hold, but you quickly push the thought away. It's not a dependency, you tell yourself. It's a necessity. It's no different than a man needing a good roof over his head or a meal in his belly. It's just what you need to survive. The first few weeks were a gentle glide into a soft, hazy peace. The days were manageable, the nights were calm, and the bottle on your mantelpiece was a source of endless comfort. But something has shifted. That warm, enveloping tide you felt after your first sip, that profound sense of blissful oblivion, has begun to wane. The dose that once carried you through the night now only offers a fleeting hour or two of peace. The bitter-sweet taste is still there, but the afterglow is dimmer, the warmth less intense. You find yourself needing to take a second dose before bed, then a third. The feeling of being wrapped in cotton wool is gone, replaced by a kind of brittle calm, a peace that feels less like a gift and more like a fragile truce with your own body. This is the grim reality of a building tolerance. Your nervous system, a surprisingly adaptable thing, has grown accustomed to the presence of opium. It's no longer a shock to the system, a sudden flood of relief. It's now just a normal part of its operating landscape. You have to put in more effort to get the same result. The magic is gone, and what's left is a scientific equation. More laudanum equals the same fleeting sense of well-being. It's a cruel game, a slow, relentless erosion of the very thing you sought in the first place. You are no longer taking the dose for pleasure, or even for comfort. You're taking it to feel normal, to not feel the raw, exposed ache of your life without it. The pain in your jaw, remember that? It's long gone, a ghost of an agony that brought you to this point. But a new kind of pain has taken its place, a vague, restless discomfort that settles in your bones and makes you feel perpetually on edge. It's a deep-seated physical craving that is more unsettling because it has no clear source. Your hands tremble in the morning, your skin feels clammy, you're perpetually tired, but your mind is a frantic whirligig of anxious thoughts. This is your body's protest, its way of telling you that the equilibrium has been permanently altered. You're running a deficit, and the only thing that can fill it is more of the syrupy liquid. You begin to increase your dosage. A teaspoon becomes a dessert spoon. You pour a larger measure, your hand shaking slightly as you do. The feeling of guilt, a small nagging voice in the back of your mind, is quickly drowned out by the rising tide of relief. It works for a time. The familiar warmth returns, but it's a hotter, more fleeting sensation, like a flash fire. You still get the peace, but it costs you more, in both money and in the sense of control you once had. That feeling of gentle peace from the beginning, that's what you are now chasing, a memory of a feeling that may never return. Historians still argue whether the medical community of the era truly understood the mechanism of tolerance and dependency. While some physicians wrote about a habit of use, they often framed it as a moral failing of the patient rather than a predictable pharmacological effect. The idea that a drug could physically rewire a person's brain was far beyond their understanding. Your routine changes again. Now, your day is a careful orchestration of doses. A morning dose to get you out of bed, a midday dose to keep you from feeling that gnawing discomfort, and a larger evening dose to ensure you can sleep. The bottle is always with you, tucked into a small pouch in your coat. You never leave home without it. It's your anchor, your safety net, your only true friend. It's a small, heavy burden, and you are its faithful servant. You become a creature of habit. Your walks take you past the apothecary, and you find yourself entering more and more frequently. The proprietor, a stooped, bespectacled man with ink-stained fingers, knows you now. He doesn't ask what ails you anymore. He simply nods, takes your money, and hands you a fresh bottle. There's a subtle change in his expression, less concern, more resignation. You feel a pang of shame, a momentary prick of a conscience that has been largely anaesthetised. But what is shame compared to the physical turmoil of withdrawal? It's a whisper against a roar. A little-known fact is that many apothecaries would keep ledgers of their most frequent laudanum customers, not as a record of addiction, but as a kind of inventory tracking. These ledgers today offer a fascinating and often heartbreaking glimpse into the lives of those who are most reliant on the drug. You stop thinking about the future. The idea of next week, next month, or even tomorrow feels too overwhelming, too demanding. Your world has shrunk to the immediate. The only thing that matters is the present moment, and ensuring you have enough laudanum to get through it. The cost of your habit is starting to climb. What was once a few shillings is now a significant portion of your weekly earnings. You start selling off little things, a few old books, a silver locket that belonged to your mother, a decent pair of boots. Each item is a small sacrifice, a little piece of your past you trade for your present comfort. You remember that a fellow tailor once told you a joke. I've started measuring my success in life by the number of stitches I can put in before I need a nap, and let me tell you, I'm a very successful man. You used to chuckle at his lazy humour, but now you find it isn't so funny. You can barely hold a needle steady. Your work has become a series of fumbling, clumsy motions. You tell your customers your hands are a bit chilled. The excuses are getting thinner, the lies more transparent. But they're just words, and words can't hurt you when you have a bottle full of oblivion in your pocket. The world outside your little bubble of dependency seems to spin faster, its demands growing louder. But you're sealed off, a diver in a deep-sea helmet, watching the chaos from a safe distance. This is the new you. The you who lives from dose to dose. The you who knows that the euphoria is fading, that the relief is becoming less potent, but who can't stop. Because the alternative is a terrifying one. The alternative is to feel everything all at once, to be flooded with the raw, unbuffered reality you've been so desperate to escape. That is the one thing you're not ready for. Not yet. The steady, creeping need for a larger dose has turned your world into a kind of scavenger hunt. It's no longer about a trip to the local apothecary, it's about a mission. The familiar stooped man behind the counter, with his knowing nods and resigned expression, has become a problem. You've drained his stock of the good stuff, the strong, unadulterated tincture, and the little bottles he offers now seem like little more than a tease. His prices have risen too, a silent tax on your growing desperation. The simple act of buying your relief has become a complex game of supply and demand, and you, my friend, are losing. So you must venture further afield, beyond the predictable streets of your neighbourhood and into the shadowy, twisting alleys of London, where the rules are a little different. This is the curious art of procurement for the addict, a strange and secret map of the city known only to those who need it. You learn to spot the signs, the small, unmarked shops tucked away in forgotten corners, the back doors of taverns where a word and a wink can get you what you need, the street hawkers who look like they're selling stale bread but are really pushing something far more potent. It's a world of whispers and secret handshakes, a kind of dark fraternity. Your first foray into this underbelly of the city is to a place called the Muddle and the Mess, a gin palace that sits on a particularly foul-smelling street near the river. The name itself is a grim promise. Inside, the air is thick with the fumes of cheap gin and unwashed bodies. A piano perpetually out of tune clangs in the corner, and the clientele are a motley crew of labourers, sailors and forgotten souls. You spot a man in the corner, his eyes a glassy sheen, a small dark bottle clutched in his hand. He catches your eye, and with a lazy tilt of his head, gestures to the bar. The barkeep is a hulking man with a scar that runs the length of his jaw. He doesn't ask what you want. He just waits, his hand already reaching under the counter. You slide over a few coins, a little more than you would normally pay, and he wordlessly pushes a small unlabelled vial across the bar. It's a different colour, a dark, muddy brown, and the scent is sharper, less sweet. This isn't the familiar comforting tincture you know. It's an unknown concoction, its potency a complete mystery. You clutch it in your hand, a mixture of fear and triumph bubbling inside you. This is a step up or a step down, depending on how you look at it. A mainstream historical fact about this period is that the unregulated sale of patent medicines and tinctures led to a massive black market. People were selling anything from watered-down concoctions to highly concentrated and dangerous mixtures, often with no idea of the active ingredients. This was a direct result of the lack of a centralised drug control system. Historians still argue whether the government's laissez-faire approach was a result of genuine ideological belief in a free market, or a simple lack of ability to police the rapidly expanding city. The laissez-faire approach, it seemed, applied to more than just commerce. You learn the rules of this new world quickly. Never ask for it by name, always pay in cash. Never look a man in the eye for too long. You become a student of the subtle language of the back alleys. A tap on the nose means you're looking for a good measure. A hand on your throat means you're out of money and looking for a trade. You find yourself haggling over the price, a desperate negotiation that feels both shameful and exhilarating. A peculiar tidbit about London's underworld in the Georgian era is that a system of runners, or hawkers, emerged, who were often children or disabled veterans. They would carry small satchels of opium-based products, blending in with the crowds and discreetly selling their wares. These runners were almost impossible for the authorities to track, making their illicit trade a surprisingly efficient and far-reaching network. You see these children, their faces smudged with soot, their eyes far too old for their years, and you know exactly what they're carrying. You don't buy from them, the risk is too high and the quality too questionable. But you feel a grim kinship. The search for your dose begins to consume you. It's no longer just a small part of your day, it's the main event. You spend hours trudging through the city, your eyes scanning for a familiar face or a whispered promise. Your work has fallen off completely. Customers have given up on you, your reputation as a reliable tailor now a distant memory. The money you earn from a stray job is immediately converted into your precious liquid. You're living hand to mouth, or more accurately, hand to bottle. The jokes, remember them. The wry asides about your life, they've stopped. The humour, that last vestige of your old self, has been replaced by a grim, single-minded focus. There is nothing funny about your life now. The world is a hard, unforgiving place, and you're just trying to survive it, one dose at a time. The fleeting sense of control you once had is long gone. The bottle is in charge now. It dictates where you go, who you talk to, and what you do. You're a ghost in your own life. You pass familiar landmarks, but they seem to belong to a different world. The cheerful market, the bustling pub, the bright lights of the theatre, all of it feels alien, like a memory of a life you once had but can no longer access. You are tethered to the city's darker corners, to the places where the desperate go to find a brief, fleeting escape. This isn't the life you imagined. But then again, you hadn't imagined much of anything lately. Your imagination has been dulled, its vibrant colours washed out to a muted, hazy grey. The truth, a bitter pill that you refuse to swallow, is that your existence has narrowed to a single purpose. The joy, the relief, the peace, it's all gone. What's left is a frantic, perpetual search for a temporary cessation of pain. You're no longer chasing oblivion. You're simply running from reality. And the reality is that the bottle is getting smaller, the money is running out, and the streets of London are a dark and dangerous place for a man who has nothing left to offer but his desperation. The fog on this particular morning is a living, breathing entity, a thick, sooty shroud that clings to the cobblestones and obscures everything beyond a few feet. It smells of damp earth and coal smoke, a familiar, suffocating perfume that has become a constant in your life. You're trudging down Fleet Street, the great artery of the city, not for pleasure but for purpose. Your last bottle is down to its dregs, and your body, in its cruel wisdom, has begun to sound the alarm. A cold sweat beads on your brow despite the clammy air. Your stomach churns. The world feels a little too sharp around the edges, a stark contrast to the blurry peace you crave. You're headed to a new contact, a back-alley supplier you heard about from a fellow wanderer at a grog shop. He's supposed to have a potent tincture, one that isn't watered down. It's a risky proposition, but you are well past caring about risk. The physical discomfort is a far greater threat than any human one. You keep your head down, your eyes fixed on the path just in front of your worn boots. The muffled clang of a blacksmith's hammer and the distant rumble of carriages are all that break the eerie silence of the fog. Suddenly, a hand clamps down on your shoulder. Your heart leaps into your throat, a frantic, feathered thing. You turn, your mind racing through every possible scenario, a robber, a madman, a creditor you've been avoiding. But the face staring back at you is not what you expected. He is not a ruffian, but a man in a smart blue coat with brass buttons. His face is clean-shaven, his eyes sharp and alert. He holds a truncheon, a short, heavy stick, and his posture is one of coiled authority. "What's your hurry, friend?" he asks, his voice surprisingly calm, almost friendly. "Lost in the fog, are we?" You stammer a response. Something about a delivery you're late for, a lie that feels brittle and transparent even to your own ears. You try to pull away, but his grip is firm. This is your first direct brush with London's nascent law enforcement. These aren't the old, toothless parish constables. This is a Bow Street runner, a member of what many consider to be Britain's first professional police force. They're a new kind of threat, a human predator who hunts not for sport but for order. A mainstream historical fact about the Bow Street runners is that they were a small, highly effective group of paid law enforcement officers founded by the writer and magistrate Henry Fielding in the mid-18th century. They operated out of a magistrate's court on Bow Street and were celebrated for their ability to pursue criminals across parish lines, a novel concept at the time. Their presence marked a major shift in urban crime control from a reactive citizen-based system to a proactive professional one. The runner's eyes narrow, and he gives you a slow, deliberate once-over, his gaze lingering on the worn fabric of your coat and the desperate look in your eyes. He can read you like an open book. He sees the jitters, the clammy skin, the subtle quiver of your lip. He knows what you are. You aren't a criminal in the traditional sense, not a pickpocket or a burglar, but you are a symptom of a larger problem, a man who has lost his way. You wonder if he's looking for someone specific or just casting a wide net, fishing for the poor and the desperate. "You look a bit under the weather, my man," he says, a note of something you can't quite identify in his voice. Is it pity? Disdain? Been partaking in the black drop, have you? The words are like a bucket of cold water. You shake your head, trying to maintain a facade of innocence, but your denials are weak. You can't stop your hand from going to the small pouch tucked inside your coat, a nervous tick that gives you away completely. A quirky tidbit about these runners is that they were often given a stipend for intelligence gathering, and many of them would frequent opium dens and gin palaces, not just to catch criminals, but to observe social trends and the habits of the city's poor. It was, in a way, an early form of sociological observation, albeit one with a very hard-edged purpose. He doesn't press you. He simply releases his grip on your shoulder. "The magistrate's office is full of men like you, friend," he says, his voice losing its pretense of friendliness. "We're not interested in the sick. We're interested in the purveyors. But mark my words, a man with a habit like yours is a man who'll do anything to feed it. Watch your step. The law has a long reach." He turns and melts back into the fog, a silent, menacing shadow. You stand there for a long moment, frozen. The thumping of your heart a frantic drumbeat against your ribs. You weren't arrested. You weren't even physically harmed. But the encounter has left you with a chilling sense of exposure. You're no longer just an invisible man in a big city. You're a man who has been seen. You have been categorized. You are now on someone's radar. It's a horrifying thought. You abandon your mission to find the new supplier. The risk is too great. The prospect of being dragged before a magistrate and forced into a workhouse, or worse, a charitable hospital for the sick and addicted, is a fate you are not ready to face. You turn back, your boots finding their way on their own, retracing your steps through the swirling fog. Historians still argue whether the Bow Street runners' focus on public order, which often meant sweeping up petty criminals and the destitute, was an effective method of crime prevention, or simply a way to make the city's problems less visible to the respectable classes. It was a new system for a new kind of city, one whose population was exploding and whose poverty was becoming a national crisis. The walk back feels longer, the fog heavier. You find yourself back at your own humble neighbourhood apothecary, the one with the familiar stooped proprietor. You walk in, the small bell on the door chiming a familiar weary note. The man behind the counter looks up, his expression a mixture of surprise and resignation. He doesn't have the good stuff you need, but he has the regular tincture, the kind that will only give you a little peace. It's better than nothing. You hand over your last few coins, not even bothering to haggle. You have to admit you're not in a strong bargaining position. As you walk out with the bottle clutched in your hand, a small joke, a dark one, surfaces in your mind. The Bow Street runners are a funny lot, you think. They don't care about the sick, but they sure do care about the desperate. And it's a desperate man, after all, who makes the best kind of criminal. You don't laugh. The thought of that cold, assessing gaze is too recent. The sense of being found out too real. The fog has begun to dissipate. The sun a weak, watery disk in the sky. The city is starting to wake up, its noises returning to their normal chaotic roar. But you can't shake the feeling of being a hunted animal. You have your bottle, yes, but you also have a new, terrifying knowledge. You're not a ghost anymore. You're a marked man. And London, in its cruel, magnificent way, has just shown you another far more dangerous side of itself. The chilling encounter with the Bow Street runner has left a permanent mark, a faint, lingering unease. It's a feeling of being exposed, of walking a tightrope with the law lurking below, waiting to catch you if you slip. You've retreated from the main thoroughfares and their prying eyes, and in doing so you've been drawn deeper into London's underbelly, into a world you never knew existed. This is the dark carnival of the addict. A chaotic, grim celebration of self-destruction, where the desperate gather not just for their poison, but for a twisted sense of community. You find yourself in an opium den, a low-ceilinged, smoky room in a cellar. The air is thick and sweet with the smell of the pipes, a sickly cloying scent that hangs in the air like a heavy blanket. The place is a menagerie of lost souls. A sailor, his face a roadmap of hard living, lies stretched out on a rough cot, a pipe dangling from his slack jaw. An elderly woman, once perhaps a respectable governess, hums a tuneless melody to herself, her eyes glazed over. It's a quiet place, a place of silent, shared suffering. There's no conversation here, only the soft gurgle of the pipes and the gentle sigh of exhaled smoke. Everyone here is chasing the same thing, the same fading dream of oblivion. The opium isn't in a tincture here, it's a dark, thick paste, a potent, raw form of the drug. You're told to heat it and smoke it in a long bamboo pipe. It's a different kind of relief, a heavier, more narcotic one. The rush is quicker, more intense, but the fall is just as steep. This is not the gentle, warm bath of your early days. This is a headlong plunge into a deep, dark sea. Historians still argue whether the popularity of opium dens in London was a direct result of the high price of legal laudanum or a more deliberate embrace of a different kind of high. Many believe it was a mix of both, with the dens offering not just a new way to consume the drug, but a safe haven for those who felt like outcasts in a society that reviled their habit. From the quiet, desperate silence of the opium dens, you venture into the raucous, drunken chaos of the gin palaces. These are a world apart. Here the air is loud with laughter and song, the floor sticky with spilled gin and beer. The patrons aren't the quiet, contemplative souls of the opium dens. They are loud, aggressive, and often violent. But they too are running from something. They are running from the cold, the hunger, the relentless misery of their lives, and the gin, a cheap, fiery liquor, is their chosen escape. You see men and women with the same hollow eyes you see in the opium dens, a vacant look that no amount of liquor can fill. A quirky tidbit about the Georgian gin craze is that many gin palaces had signs that read "drunk for a penny, dead for twopence," a grim but accurate marketing slogan that speaks volumes about the quality of the liquor and its lethal effects. The gin was often a dangerous mixture of turpentine, sulfuric acid, and other toxic chemicals, all of which led to a different kind of addiction, one that was far more visible and violent. You don't find your relief here, but you find a strange, unsettling kinship. You're all sailors on the same sinking ship, just in different parts of the vessel. You see a man selling what he claims is the black drop out of a satchel, and you feel a jolt of recognition. You've walked this path before. You begin to recognize a grim truth. The life of an addict is a cyclical one. The brief, heady escape is followed by a brutal return to reality, a brief moment of lucidity where you are forced to confront what you've become. The humour you once had, the small jokes and wry observations, have been replaced by a grim resignation. You're a man in a bad play, and you know the ending, but you can't get off the stage. You find yourself with a strange kind of social standing in these places. You're not a drunk. You're not a brawler. You're quiet and you have money, which makes you a rare and valuable commodity. People approach you, not for conversation, but for a handout. A man with a mangled hand, a former dock worker, tells you a sob story about a sick child and a desperate need for a few coins. You give him what you can, not out of pity, but out of a grim understanding. You're all in the same boat, sailing on the same dark sea. You're just a little further along on the journey. A mainstream historical fact about London's underclass in this period is that the gin craze and the rise of opium use were not isolated phenomena. They were symptoms of a much larger social illness, fueled by poverty, industrialisation, and a lack of a social safety net. The diseases of the urban poor, tuberculosis, cholera, malnutrition, were rampant, and the pain and suffering were unimaginable. For many, a bottle of laudanum or a glass of gin was not an escape, but a form of self-medication, a desperate attempt to numb the relentless physical and emotional pain of a miserable existence. The jokes you hear now are dark and brittle. A man, his face a mask of sorrow, tells a joke about a ghost who came back to haunt his old home, only to find the new owner was an opium addict who couldn't even see him through his haze. The laughter that follows is hollow and joyless. It's the sound of people who have forgotten what it feels like to be happy, but remember how to pretend. Your own life has become a series of these grim excursions. You're no longer just a tailor. You're a connoisseur of misery, a student of self-destruction. You've seen the depths of London's depravity, and you've found a curious kind of comfort there. In a world that offers no solace, no kindness, you've found a place where your affliction is not a mark of shame, but a common bond. You're not alone. You're part of a secret, silent army, a legion of the damned all marching to the same grim beat, and in a strange, terrible way that makes you feel a little less lonely. The quiet, gentle peace you first found in that small brown bottle is now a distant memory. The euphoria, the sense of blissful escape, is long gone, replaced by a grim, utilitarian need. The warm, comforting tide that once rose within you has become a faint ripple, barely enough to keep the relentless sea of your body's rebellion at bay. Your body, that sturdy workhorse instrument that once served you so well, has begun to turn on you, its protest a slow, relentless sabotage. You've noticed the physical changes, of course. They started subtly at first, a faint tremor in your hands that you blamed on the cold. Then came the clammy skin, a perpetual cold sweat that makes you feel perpetually damp. The hollowed-out look in the eyes of your fellow addicts in the dens and palaces is now your own reflection. Your cheeks are sunken, your jaw is slack, and the thin skin around your eyes is a sickly yellow grey. You no longer recognise the face in the cracked mirror above your basin. It's a stranger's face, a hollow mask of a man you once knew. Your teeth, a source of such early torment, have begun to rot. Laudanum, a mainstream historical fact, is a mixture of alcohol and opium, and the sugar content, along with the neglect of hygiene, led to widespread dental decay among addicts. Your breath is sour, and your gums bleed when you eat. The pain, a new kind of pain, is a constant dull throb in your jaw that no amount of liquid can completely numb. It's a bitter irony, a full-circle torment that reminds you of how this journey began. The digestion is a torment all its own. Laudanum, with its powerful constipating effects, has turned your insides into a sluggish, knotted mess. Your stomach is in a perpetual state of cramp and discomfort. A doctor, if you had one, would diagnose you with the gripes, a common term for digestive distress among the poor. But you know what it is. It's your body's refusal to accept the poison you are forcing into it. A quirky tidbit is that many addicts of the era would carry a small vial of a digestive aid, a concoction of various herbs and alcohols meant to ease this discomfort. Of course, many of these aids were also laced with a small amount of opium, creating a vicious cycle where the cure for the side effects was more of the drug that caused them. Your nights are a special kind of hell. You can't sleep without a dose, but even with one, your sleep is a shallow, fitful thing, filled with feverish dreams and waking terrors. The nightmares are vivid, chaotic reenactments of your daily fears, the runners, the lack of funds, the empty bottle. You wake up with your heart pounding, the sheets twisted around you like a shroud. You are perpetually exhausted, a kind of bone-deep weariness that no amount of rest can cure. Historians still argue whether the physical symptoms of laudanum addiction were truly misunderstood as a distinct syndrome or simply conflated with other ailments of the poor. The doctors of the era had no concept of a withdrawal syndrome as we understand it today. They saw the restlessness, the tremors, the nausea and the fevers as symptoms of other, more traditional ailments, like consumption or a nervous constitution. This lack of understanding meant that addicts were often treated with more of the very thing that was harming them, a grim and endless cycle of misdiagnosis. The jokes, that last vestige of your old self, are now completely gone. There is nothing funny about any of this. The body is a traitorous thing, a house of horrors that you are forced to inhabit. You look in the mirror, and you don't just see a ghost of yourself, you see a decaying ruin. The face of the person you once were is gone, eroded by the slow, relentless tide of your habit. Your hands, once skilled and steady, are now a constant source of shame. The tremors are no longer faint. They are a constant visible shake that makes even the simplest tasks, like tying your shoes or holding a glass, a Herculean effort. Your customers, the ones who once relied on your fine stitching, have long since abandoned you. The fine art of tailoring your life's work has become impossible. The needlework is sloppy, the threads are loose, the seams are crooked. You've become a hack, a joke, and you've lost the one thing you had that made you feel respectable. The shame is a heavy leaden weight in your chest. You've lost your friends, your reputation, your health, and now your livelihood. All for a fleeting, diminishing sense of peace. You can still feel the physical discomfort, even with a dose. The relief is no longer a cessation of pain, but a brief respite from agony. The warm, comforting tide is now a thin, sickly wash. The end feels close, the end of something at least. You are nearing the limits of what your body can endure. It's a race between you and your own decay, and you're losing. The physical decay is a daily torment, a constant nagging reminder of your downward spiral. But the true, soul-crushing agony is the decay of your world. It's a slow, steady erosion, a quiet devastation that leaves you with nothing but a hollow shell of a life. Your existence has shrunk to the width of a single street, to the small, grimy confines of your room, to the singular focus of your next dose. This is the hollowed-out existence of a laudanum addict in Georgian London, where the grand, bustling city outside becomes nothing more than a backdrop for your own private, miserable drama. Your relationships, once a source of warmth and support, have evaporated. Remember your friends, the ones who used to meet you for a pint at the local. They are now distant memories. Last time you saw one, a man you'd known since you were boys, he pretended not to see you, his gaze sliding past you as if you were just a ghost on the street. It was a clear, unambiguous message. You're no longer one of us. You're a pariah. This is a common and tragic consequence of addiction. The addict's world becomes so small that there is no room for anyone else. The bottle is a jealous mistress, and it demands your undivided attention. It has taken your friends, and it has taken your family. Your family. The thought of them is a source of searing pain, a sharp, cold jab that cuts through the hazy calm of your doses. You haven't seen them in months. You've sent them excuses, a series of increasingly flimsy lies about a long-distant illness, about a pressing job that keeps you from travelling. But you know they know. They have heard the whispers from the neighbourhood. They have seen the changes in your appearance. And you know, deep down, that you're a source of shame and disappointment. You're not a son they can be proud of. You're a burden, a failure, a ghost of the man they once knew. This is where the emotional toll becomes far greater than the physical one. The gut-wrenching shame, the deep-seated guilt, the horrifying realization that you have traded everything that matters for a temporary fleeting sense of peace. This is the loneliness of addiction, a state of complete and utter isolation. You are surrounded by people, but you are a world away from all of them. You're a spectator in your own life, watching it crumble and fall apart with no power to stop it. A mainstream historical fact about Georgian society is that addiction, particularly to opium, was seen not as a medical problem but as a moral failing. It was believed that a person's lack of character and willpower was what led them to such a state. This judgment was harsh and unforgiving, and it meant that families often disowned addicted members to protect their own reputations. It was a period when the outward appearance of respectability was paramount, and anything that threatened it was to be cast out. This societal view left countless addicts with no support, no one to turn to, and no one to pull them back from the brink. Your work is long gone. The fine stitching that was your pride and joy is a distant memory. The tailor's shop you once rented is occupied by someone else now, a young man whose face is bright with ambition and hope. You pass by it sometimes, a shadow on the other side of the street, and you feel a pang of a life you have lost. You have no purpose, no reason to get up in the morning besides the urgent, pressing need to find your next dose. You've become a simple machine, a living vessel for a substance. Your world has narrowed to a single, relentless cycle of want and relief. Historians still argue whether the moral judgment of the era's medical community was a genuine belief or a convenient way to avoid taking responsibility for the suffering that their own prescriptions helped create. It was easier to blame the patient for a weak constitution than to admit that a commonplace medication was a powerfully addictive substance. This lack of accountability and compassion meant that countless lives were ruined, and no one was there to catch the falling. A quirky tidbit is that some of the more progressive medical practitioners of the time tried to categorize the different types of addicts. They would classify them as melancholic addicts, who were using the drug to escape depression, or nervous addicts, who were using it to calm anxiety. While these classifications were often flawed, they were a small step towards seeing addiction as something other than a simple moral failing. But for the most part, society at large still saw you as a weak, pathetic creature, not a sick man. You are a man who has lost everything. Your money is gone, your health is gone, and your home is now just a squalid room where you go to pass out. You have nothing left to sell, nothing left to trade. The spectre of poverty, a constant companion for a man of your station, has now become a living, breathing reality. You're no longer just poor, you are destitute. The shame is a silent, creeping terror. You find yourself avoiding the day, staying in bed until the sun is high in the sky, and then slinking out under the cover of dusk. You are a nocturnal creature, a rat of the city, only coming out when the respectable people have gone to bed. You are a disgrace to yourself and to the people who once loved you. You have become a living, breathing testament to your own failure. This is the ultimate cost of your journey, the final destination of a path you took to escape a simple toothache. The money, your last connection to a functional life, has run out. You've sold everything of value, from your mother's locket to your last good coat. All that remains is the squalid room and the worn-out clothes on your back. The small, dark bottles from the back alleys and the gin palaces are no longer an option. The well has run dry, and now, the true cost of your journey, the horrifying bill that has been accruing for months, has finally come due. This is the moment you've been dreading since you first felt that calm, warm tide rise within you. This is withdrawal. It starts insidiously, a slow, creeping unease, the clammy skin, the nervous tremors, the churning stomach, all the physical torments that were once quelled by a quick dose now return with a vengeance. The gentle tide of your addiction has receded, leaving you stranded on the raw, exposed beach of your own body. Your mind, a place that has been a hazy, placid lake for months, is now a frantic, chaotic storm. Your thoughts are 100 buzzing bees, a frantic, jumbled mess of fear, regret, and a blinding, searing need. The physical symptoms of withdrawal are a special kind of hell. The nausea is a constant companion, a roiling sickness that makes it impossible to keep food down. Your joints ache with a deep bone-grinding pain, as if every sinew in your body is being pulled taut. Your limbs feel heavy and leaden one moment, and then a kind of restless, frantic energy overtakes you, a deep-seated need to move, to thrash, to run away from your own skin. This is the restless leg syndrome that many addicts experience, a quirky tidbit of a very grim reality. It's a constant maddening need to twitch and stretch, a feeling that no amount of motion can satisfy. You are trapped in your own flesh, a prisoner of your own nervous system. You lie in bed, but you can't sleep. Sleep is impossible. Every muscle aches. Your mind is a whirlwind. The sheets, once a soft comfort, are now a scratchy, miserable shroud. You toss and turn, a feverish, restless ghost in your own room. The nightmares, when they come, are not the hazy, narcotic terrors of your addiction. They are sharp, vivid, and horrifyingly real. You dream of being pursued by the Bow Street runners, of your family turning away from you in disgust, of being trapped in a dark, empty bottle. You wake up screaming, your body drenched in sweat. A mainstream historical fact is that the symptoms of opium withdrawal were often mistaken for a host of other diseases in Georgian London. Doctors would diagnose it as everything from a nervous disorder to a putrid fever. They had no word for withdrawal syndrome. So when a patient would come to them, suffering from the horrific symptoms of opium detox, they would often prescribe a small dose of laudanum to calm them, believing it was a simple tonic. This, of course, would provide temporary relief, but it would also perpetuate the cycle of addiction, a grim example of a medical system that was blind to the very disease it was helping to create. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine lack of understanding or a deliberate, if unstated, policy of keeping the urban poor docile and functional. A working man, even a sick one, was more valuable than a man laid low by withdrawal. The bottle, a little bit of oblivion, was seen as a way to keep the machine of the city running. The phantom pains are the worst. Your jaw, the source of your initial torment, aches with a renewed phantom agony, a ghost of a pain you no longer have. Your body remembers the suffering it endured, and it is now punishing you for the relief you sought. It's a cruel joke, a kind of dark irony that you're now being tormented by the very thing that brought you here. You feel a profound sense of loss, not just of the drug, but of the person you were before it. You remember the man who was a good tailor, who had friends, who laughed at bad jokes. That man is gone. He is a distant, half-forgotten memory. All that remains is this wretched, shivering creature in this squalid room, a monument to a life wasted. You try to get up, to go outside, to find some kind of distraction. But your body is a leaden weight. Every muscle screams in protest. The simplest motion, lifting your head from the pillow, is an immense effort. You're in a physical and mental prison, and there is no escape. The withdrawal, the agony of the withdrawal, is a punishment that feels perfectly matched to your crime. In the midst of this misery, a strange realization surfaces. This is what you were running from. This is the raw, unbuffered reality you've been so desperate to avoid. You can feel every single discomfort, every single ache, every single fear. There is no filter, no protective veil. You're exposed, and it is horrifying. And yet, there is a small part of you, a glimmer of a thought, that wonders if this agony, this pain, is not a punishment, but a cleansing fire. It is a terrifying thought, but it's a thought nonetheless. It is a return to a raw, unadulterated existence, a return to feeling something other than a chemical calm. And for a brief, fleeting moment, that thought is more terrifying than the pain itself. But you're too exhausted to think about it for long. The physical torment is a loud, insistent companion, and it is all you can feel. The raw, unbuffered agony of withdrawal has lasted for what feels like an eternity. The shivering, the cramping, the all-consuming nausea. It's a living nightmare that has turned your small room into a prison. You lie on the floor, too weak to get back in the bed, your body a mass of tremors and pain. The thought of finding more laudanum is a persistent gnawing hunger, but the effort to even stand up feels impossible. You are a ship with no sail, tossed about on a sea of your own suffering. Then, a knock on the door. It's a neighbour, an old woman who sometimes brings you stale bread. She takes one look at your shaking, sweating form, and her face, a roadmap of hard living, softens with something that looks like pity. She doesn't ask what ails you. She knows. She has seen this before, and in her eyes you see a lifetime of quiet misery. She returns a few minutes later, and standing next to her is a man in a black coat with a small leather bag. He introduces himself as a physic, a doctor who specialises in nervous disorders. He approaches you with a practised, detached air, and his fingers, long and cold, prod at your clammy skin. He holds your wrist, checking your feverish pulse. He doesn't ask you about your habit. He doesn't need to. The signs are written all over your emaciated frame. He nods to himself, a silent internal confirmation. He pulls a small metal box from his bag, and from it, a dark, pill-like object. The Chinese cure, he says, a strange knowing look in his eye. A new method from the Orient. It will cleanse you of the malady. This is a mainstream historical fact, though it was a fringe practice at the time. As opium addiction became more common, some doctors began to experiment with a brutal and often ineffective method of treatment known as the purge. The idea was to cleanse the body of the drug and its poisons by inducing a violent physical reaction. This so-called Chinese cure involved administering large doses of a powerful laxative and emetic, often a mixture of herbs and potent chemicals, with the aim of forcing the drug from the system. It was a barbaric treatment, and one that often left the patient in a worse state than before. Historians still argue whether these doctors were genuinely trying to help, or were simply profiting from the misery of the addicted. He forces the bitter, foul-tasting pill down your throat, and you swallow, gagging. For a moment, you feel nothing. Then, a new kind of torment begins. Your stomach, already a knotted mess, begins to spasm with a new, violent energy. A wave of nausea, unlike anything you have ever felt before, washes over you. You are suddenly, violently and without warning, sick. The illness is a physical, racking thing that leaves you gasping for breath, your body contorting in agony. The purging lasts for hours, a relentless, punishing cycle of vomiting and cramping that drains you of every last ounce of strength. The doctor watches with a cold professional interest. He checks your pulse again, his expression unreadable. To him, this is not a man suffering. This is a scientific experiment. A peculiar tidbit about this treatment is that it was often accompanied by a strict diet of bland, liquid foods, which the doctors believed would purify the patient's system. The irony, of course, is that the patient, already malnourished, was being starved of the very nutrients they needed to recover. After the worst of it is over, you are a shell of a man. You are weak, dehydrated, and trembling. The doctor leaves, his fee paid by the kind, if misguided, neighbour. He gives you a small, unlabelled bottle of a tonic, a thin, watery liquid that he promises will restore your strength. You take a sip and find that it has the faint, familiar, bitter-sweet taste. A small amount of laudanum hidden in the cure itself. A grim, quiet joke. He knew the torment of withdrawal was too great, and he knew that without some relief you would find yourself back in the arms of the drug again. The treatment was a kind of performance, a show of medical knowledge, but the real solution was the same as it ever was. A little bit of the very thing that made you sick. This experience, this brutal physical punishment, does nothing to break your addiction. In fact, it does the opposite. It reinforces the idea that the only escape from pain is more laudanum. It teaches you that the medical establishment, the very people who are supposed to help you, are either apathetic or incompetent. The cure was a new kind of hell, a fresh layer of misery on top of the old one. The memory of the purging, the violence, the pain will stay with you forever. Historians still argue whether the medical community of the era was genuinely ignorant of the true nature of addiction, or was simply complicit in a system that preyed on the poor and the sick. The cures they offered were often more dangerous than the affliction, and the cycle of dependency was rarely, if ever, broken. This was a system that was designed to fail. As you lie there, a hollowed-out husk of a man, you feel a kind of grim clarity. You're alone. The world is cruel. The only comfort you have ever known, the only peace you have ever found, came from a small dark bottle. The doctor's visit, a brief horrifying interlude, has taught you a bitter lesson. There is no one to save you. There is no cure. There is only more suffering. You will not try to quit again. The memory of this agony is a searing brand on your mind, a testament to what happens when you try to escape the only thing that holds your world together. The physical torment of the cure has left you with a new, bitter understanding of the world. There is no easy way out. There is no simple solution. The pain of withdrawal is a brutal, punishing reality, and the memory of it, a searing brand on your mind, is a far more powerful deterrent than any moralizing sermon could ever be. You have a choice: to endure this relentless agony or to return to the only thing that has ever given you peace. The choice, for a man in your state, is no choice at all. You will not try to quit again. And so, you find yourself back on the wretched carousel. The first step is to find the money. The neighbour who paid for the doctor's visit is now a source of deep shame, and you can't bring yourself to ask her for more. So you resort to the old familiar ways. You find a few more things to sell. Small, almost worthless items. A pair of well-worn boots, a cracked leather belt, a single, tarnished button from a coat you once had. The sums you get are pitiful, barely enough for a single dose. But it's enough to get you started. Your first trip is to the back alleys, to the familiar shadowy places where you know you can find what you need. The man you buy from, a greasy, furtive creature, doesn't even bother to look you in the eye. He just takes your coins and hands you a small unlabelled vial. This is a far cry from the comforting brown bottle of your early days. This is a desperate, anonymous transaction, a moment of pure, unadulterated shame. But the relief when it comes is immediate and overwhelming. The first sip is a jolt of warm honey. The shivering stops. The gnawing ache in your bones recedes. The world, which had been a harsh, screaming cacophony of pain, returns to a hazy, quiet hum. This is the grim reality of a relapse. It's not a moment of weakness. It's a moment of surrender. You have been fighting a war you could not win, and you are finally laying down your arms. The relief is not the joyful oblivion of your first dose. It's a kind of grim, heavy peace, a confirmation that this is your life now. This is your path. This is your destination. You are a man who is back on the wretched carousel, and you have no intention of getting off. A mainstream historical fact is that for many laudanum addicts of the Georgian era, relapse was not an aberration but a certainty. The brutal and often ineffective treatments available, combined with the lack of social support and the constant availability of the drug, meant that a brief period of sobriety was often followed by a rapid return to the habit. The cycle of addiction in this era was a kind of death sentence, a slow, inexorable march towards ruin. Your life, what's left of it, takes on a new kind of rhythm. You no longer dream of a different existence. You no longer have the energy for hope. Your days are a grim, repetitive cycle of finding money and getting your next dose. You're a ghost, a shadow in the streets, your face a mask of weary resignation. You have no friends, no family, and no purpose. The only thing that matters is the bottle and the brief fleeting sense of normalcy it provides. Historians still argue whether the high rate of relapse in this period was a result of the addictive properties of the drug or the sheer misery of the addict's life. A man who has nothing to live for, after all, has little reason to stop. The cycle of poverty and addiction was a vicious one, with each feeding into the other in a slow, relentless spiral. For many, laudanum was not a symptom of their misery, but a logical, if tragic, response to it. A peculiar tidbit from this time is that some doctors believed that the best way to help a relapsing addict was not to punish them, but to maintain their dosage at a low functional level. This was a form of what we would now call harm reduction, an attempt to keep the addict from spiralling into the dangerous back alleys and the more potent, unregulated forms of the drug. It was a fringe theory, and one that was largely rejected by the moralizing mainstream, but it was a small sign of a growing, albeit begrudging, compassion for the plight of the addicted. You feel a profound sense of emptiness. The physical pain is gone, but the emptiness, the void where your life used to be, is a far greater torment. You are a man who has lost everything, and you're now a man who has accepted his fate. The shame is still there, a dull, nagging voice in the back of your mind, but you've learned to drown it out with a dose. The guilt is still there, but you've learned to push it down with a sip. You're a creature of habit, and your habit is now all that defines you. You're a man on a carousel, a wooden horse going round and round. The music is tinny and out of tune. The ride is dizzying and repetitive. You can see the world outside, but you can't get off, and you no longer want to. The fear of what lies beyond the ride is far greater than the misery of the ride itself. You're a passenger on a journey to nowhere, and you are content to stay on the ride until the very end. The grim reality of your relapse is not just a return to the habit, it's a return to the relentless soul-crushing quest for funds. The handful of coins you scrounged together from selling your last few possessions are gone, spent on the cheap back-alley tincture that barely provided an hour of peace. You are, once again, a man with a need and an empty pocket, and the scramble for your next dose is a gnawing, all-consuming hunger that pushes you to the brink of desperation. Your room is now completely bare. The mattress is a stained, lumpy mess. The walls are cracked and peeling. The cold seeps in from the street, a biting, relentless chill that you can't escape. You have nothing left to sell. Not a single book, not a chair, not even a spare shirt. You're at rock bottom, a hollowed-out husk of a man with no possessions and no prospects. The thought of stealing, a line you swore you would never cross, now flickers in your mind like a guttering candle flame. It's a terrifying thought, but the tremors in your hands and the relentless ache in your bones are a far more compelling argument. You begin to notice the small things, the little opportunities that the more respectable citizens of London are blind to. A dropped coin in the mud, a loose board on a crate that might be hiding something, a careless gentleman with a loose purse. This is the world of the destitute, a world of constant low-level scavenging. You're a human magpie, always on the lookout for a glint of metal, a scrap of paper that might be worth a few coins. A mainstream historical fact is that petty crime, often of desperation, was rampant in Georgian London. With no social safety net and a harsh, unforgiving justice system, a man with a family to feed or a habit to support often had no choice but to steal. The penalties were brutal, with even minor offences often punishable by transportation to the colonies, or in a few cases death. This created a vicious cycle where a man in need would commit a crime, be caught and punished, and then, upon his return, find himself even more destitute and with fewer options than before. You're no thief by nature. You're a tailor, a man of skill and craft. But the man you were is gone, and in his place is a creature of need. Your first attempt at theft is clumsy and terrifying. You try to lift a handkerchief from a gentleman's pocket, and your trembling hand is so slow and fumbling that he turns and catches you in the act. He doesn't call the runners. He simply gives you a look of pure, unadulterated disgust, and you feel a hot wave of shame wash over you. The shame is a brief, searing thing, quickly replaced by the gnawing, insistent ache of your body. You realise that a criminal life is a profession, a skill, and you have no talent for it. So you turn to a different kind of trade, the sale of your own body, not in a physical way, but in the most degrading, humiliating way possible. You begin to offer to do menial, disgusting tasks for a few coins, shoveling manure from the streets, cleaning out the gutters, carrying heavy loads for market traders. These are jobs for the most desperate of the desperate, a kind of invisible caste that lives in the shadows of the city. The work is back-breaking, filthy, and the pay is a pittance. But it is enough for a small vial. Historians still argue whether the extreme poverty of the era and the crimes it spawned was a failure of the government's economic policies or an inevitable consequence of the rapid, unchecked growth of London. It was a city of stark and unforgiving contrasts, with immense wealth and unimaginable poverty living side by side. The misery of the poor was a kind of hidden secret, a secret that was revealed in the squalid conditions of the slums and in the desperate acts of men like you. A quirky tidbit from the time is that some of the city's scavengers would specialise in finding particular types of waste to sell. There were the bone grubbers, who collected old bones for use in making glue and fertiliser, and the pure finders, who collected dog waste for use in the tanning industry. These were grim, disgusting jobs, but for a man on the brink of starvation, they were a lifeline. You are a bone grubber now, a man who rummages through the city's refuse for a few coins. The shame is a constant companion, a silent witness to your daily degradation. You no longer look people in the eye. You keep your head down, your face a mask of weary resignation. You are a part of the city's refuse now, a sad, broken thing that lives on the scraps of others. Your dreams are not of a different life, but of the simple, quiet peace of a dose. You're no longer living. You're simply existing. One day, one moment, one agonizing scramble at a time. This is the ultimate cost of your journey. You have become a thing, an object of pity and disgust, and you have lost the last vestiges of your own humanity. The desperate scramble for a few coins has become a daily torment, a grueling, humiliating ritual that defines your every waking moment. The small, petty crimes, the back-breaking, filthy labour, it all just barely buys you a few hours of peace. The money runs out almost as fast as you earn it, and you are perpetually teetering on the edge of a new kind of abyss. This isn't just poverty, this is destitution, and it carries with it a new, far more terrifying threat: the workhouse. The workhouse, a mainstream historical fact about Georgian and Victorian England, was a place of last resort for the poor and the destitute. It was a kind of prison for the penniless, a place where you would be given food and shelter in exchange for back-breaking, tedious labour. It was a brutal system, designed to be a deterrent, a place so grim that no one would choose to go there unless they had absolutely no other option. They were often run by unsympathetic overseers, and the conditions were often unsanitary and dangerous. The spectre of the workhouse hangs over your head like a dark cloud, a looming threat that chills you to the bone. You see them everywhere, the people who have already crossed that threshold. The men in the rough, ill-fitting uniforms, their faces gaunt and their eyes hollow. They are the living ghosts of the city, a quiet, shuffling testament to the finality of their situation. You've heard the stories. The endless, mind-numbing labour, picking apart old rope or crushing bones for fertiliser. The tiny, miserable rations of gruel. The constant humiliation and degradation. The separation of families, with husbands and wives, mothers and children, all housed in different wards, forbidden to speak to one another. It's a fate far worse than death. A joke, a grim one, you hear from a fellow scavenger, is that the only reason a man would choose to go to a workhouse is to die there, since they didn't have to pay for a funeral. It's a laughless joke, a quiet, bitter acknowledgement of their plight. You're perilously close to joining them. The price of your laudanum, the cost of your very existence, has become too high to maintain with your miserable earnings. You're always a step behind, a single, missed dose, away from a return to the horrific torments of withdrawal. You look at your own emaciated hands, the dirt ingrained under your fingernails, and you see the future. You're just a few bad days away from being on your knees begging for a ticket to the workhouse. Historians still argue whether the workhouse system was a necessary evil, a way to manage the overwhelming poverty of the era, or a cruel, inhumane institution that only exacerbated the suffering of the poor. It was a product of the era's stern moralizing, a belief that poverty was a sign of laziness and vice, and that a harsh hand was needed to correct it. It was a system that punished the victim, a system that was utterly blind to the systemic failures that created the poverty in the first place. A peculiar tidbit about the workhouses is that some of them had small, segregated wards for the lunatics and the idiots. Many of these were people who were suffering from the psychological and physical effects of drug and alcohol addiction. They were not seen as sick people in need of help, but as a different, more pathetic kind of criminal, a drain on society that needed to be locked away. The idea that a man suffering from addiction could find himself in a lunatic asylum is a terrifying one, a final, complete erasure of his identity. You feel a profound, soul-crushing terror. The bottle has been your constant companion, your only source of comfort, but it has led you to this. It has delivered you, hand and foot, to the doorstep of your own destruction. All the sacrifices, all the degradation, all the misery, it has all been in service of an illusion. The peace was a lie. The comfort was a lie. The only truth is the gnawing hunger for your next dose and the cold, unblinking spectre of the workhouse. You begin to avoid the main streets, the places where you might be seen by a well-meaning parish official who might help you by forcing you into that grim grey world. You are a hunted animal, not by the law, but by a form of charity that you fear more than any punishment. You are a man with nothing left to lose, and yet the workhouse threatens to take even that last miserable shred of your life. It's a cruel, ironic fate. You came to London to escape the small, suffocating world of your past, and you are now on the verge of being sealed in a world that is even smaller, even more suffocating. This is the final act of your tragedy. The bottle, a small dark vial of oblivion, has delivered you, not to a peaceful, painless end, but to a living, waking nightmare. The spectre of the workhouse, a cold and hungry ghost, is a constant companion. It has driven you from the few remaining places of solace and comfort, and forced you even deeper into the city's underbelly. The search for your next dose has taken you to the forgotten corners of London, to the places where the light of respectability never shines. And here, in the shadows, among the truly destitute, you find a strange and unsettling thing, a twisted sense of community. This isn't the cheerful, boisterous camaraderie of the pub you once knew. It's not the quiet, polite conversation of the Tailors' Guild. This is a community born of shared misery, a fraternity of the damned. You find yourself spending your days in the company of men and women who, like you, have fallen through the cracks of society. They are a motley crew, a former soldier with a missing leg, a pale, consumptive woman who was once a seamstress, an old man who once worked in a bookshop. They are all here, in this filthy, desperate world, for the same reason. They are all running from something, and they are all chasing a brief fleeting escape. This is a mainstream historical fact that historians still argue about. While the Georgian era is often depicted as a time of stark, unforgiving individualism, the reality was that the poor and the destitute often formed their own informal social networks. These were not charities or organisations, but loose, unspoken agreements to help one another, to share information about where to find a few coins or where to find a cheap back-alley dose. It was a kind of a survival mechanism, a way to navigate a world that offered them no quarter. You find yourself in a huddle with these people, huddled around a small smoky fire in a deserted alleyway. You share the news of the day, where the Bow Street runners were seen, which apothecary is out of stock, which gentleman is a known mark for a quick pinch. You don't know their names, they don't know yours. Your identities have been stripped away, replaced by the simple, unifying fact of your shared desperation. A peculiar tidbit about this subculture is that they often had their own form of argot, a secret language of slang and codes that was indecipherable to the outside world. They would use terms like the black drop, or tincture, not as a secret code, but as a kind of a common tongue, a unifying word that everyone understood. The conversations are not about grand ideas or hopes for the future. They are about the mundane, the immediate, the pressing need. You talk about the weather, about the price of stale bread, about the best way to keep a small fire going, and you talk about the drug. It's a constant low-level hum in every conversation. Who has it? How much does it cost? Is it any good? The laudanum is not just a drug. It is a currency, a measure of your worth, a topic of endless conversation. You see a different kind of human nature here. Stripped of the pretense and the social graces of the outside world, these people are both more generous and more cruel than the respectable classes. A man with a lucky find of a few coins will share a small portion with his friends, a silent gesture of solidarity. But a man who is desperate and in withdrawal will steal the very shoes off your feet if he thinks it will get him a dose. It's a world of extremes, a world where the lines between good and evil have blurred into a hazy moral grey. You find a strange kind of solace in this. You're no longer alone in your misery. You're not a solitary failure. You're one of many. You're a member of a quiet, desperate army, and that knowledge, in a strange, terrible way, is a kind of comfort. You no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to lie about your condition. You can be honest about your hunger, about your pain, about your need. Everyone here understands. They are all carrying the same burden. A joke, a grim, self-deprecating one, is passed around the group. A man asks his friend what he would do if he found a shilling. The friend, without a moment's hesitation, says he would buy a dose of laudanum. The first man says, "No, you fool, you should buy bread." And the second man, with a shrug, says, "What for? I'm not hungry. I have my dose." It's not a funny joke. It's a statement of fact, a quiet, bitter acknowledgement that your hunger for the drug has superseded all other needs. You have lost everything. Your money, your health, your home, your family, your friends. But in this squalid, filthy corner of London, you have found a new kind of family. They are not the family you were born to, but they are the family you have chosen. They are the people who understand. They are the people who will not judge you. They are the people who have lost their way, just like you. And in a strange, twisted way, you are grateful. You are no longer alone. You are a member of a community of the lost, and that is enough to keep you going, for now. The grim, shared misery of your new community has become a strange kind of comfort, a place where your affliction is a shared bond instead of a mark of shame. You're all on the same sinking ship, and there is a kind of grim camaraderie in that. But a sinking ship, even one full of friends, is still a sinking ship. The world of the addict is not just one of slow decay and quiet desperation. It is a world of sudden, terrifying shocks. A world where the line between a blissful escape and a fatal one is a razor-thin thing. And on this particular night, you witness a man cross that line. His name is Tom, or at least that's what he told you. He's a former soldier, a man with a wild, haunted look in his eyes and a constant tremor in his hands. He's been talking all day about a new supplier, a man who has a particularly potent tincture, a mixture he claims is the real thing. You listen with a tired, weary sense of detachment. You have heard this before, but Tom is excited, his gaunt face animated by a manic energy that you rarely see in your world. He manages to scrape together a few coins, and he disappears into the night, promising to return a new man. He returns a few hours later, a small dark vial clutched in his hand, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph on his face. He is a man who has just found treasure. He sits down next to you, his breathing shallow and quick, and uncorks the vial. The scent is different, sharper, more pungent than the watered-down concoctions you've been taking. He takes a large, reckless swallow, a long, greedy gulp, and then another. A moment passes, then another. He smiles, a wide, beatific smile that stretches his thin lips. The black drop, he whispers, a look of pure, unadulterated peace on his face. The real thing. A mainstream historical fact is that the unregulated sale of laudanum and other opium-based products led to a terrifyingly high rate of accidental overdose. The potency of the tinctures varied wildly from supplier to supplier, and a dose that was safe one day could be a lethal dose the next. There was no way for an addict to know what they were getting, and for those who had developed a high tolerance, the temptation to take a larger, more potent dose was often irresistible. It was a kind of Russian roulette, a dangerous game with a very high price. Tom's eyes begin to glaze over, the manic energy draining from him in an instant. He leans back against the brick wall, a look of utter serenity on his face. The peace he has found is deeper, more profound than anything you have ever seen. You feel a pang of jealousy, a brief, sharp stab of longing. Then something changes. His breathing, which was shallow and quick, becomes slow and ragged. His eyelids flutter, and his head lolls to the side. The beatific smile is still on his face, but his skin has taken on a pale, waxy sheen, a sickening grey colour. You shake him. You call his name, but he doesn't respond. His body is a limp, heavy weight. You look at his face, and you see the chilling face of an overdose, the wide, unblinking eyes, the pallid skin, the shallow, gurgling breaths. He is no longer on a journey. He has arrived at his final destination. This is not the peaceful sleep of oblivion you once knew. This is a kind of death, a slow, quiet suffocation. Historians still argue whether the high rate of overdose was a simple consequence of the lack of regulation, or a quiet, tragic form of suicide among the destitute. For a man with no hope, no family, and no future, a single potent dose was a final, complete escape. It was a kind of desperate logic, a final, unanswerable response to a life of pain and misery. A peculiar tidbit about the era is that an overdose was often referred to as the Great Sleep. It was a common euphemism, a way of talking about a tragic reality without having to confront its horror. The idea was that the addict simply went to sleep and never woke up, a gentle, peaceful ending to a life of struggle. But you see the truth. You see the gasping, the gurgling, the slow, terrifying suffocation. There is nothing peaceful about it. The other people in your group gather around, their faces grim and silent. There is no panic, No shouting, just a grim, knowing acceptance. This is a part of your world. This is the price you pay. One of the men, a former sailor, kneels down and takes the vial from Tom's hand. He holds it up to the weak light of the fire, a look of greedy triumph on his face. He's not a cruel man, he's a desperate man, and a desperate man will do anything to get what he needs. He takes a small, cautious sip from the vial, his eyes wide and watchful. The rest of the group watches him in silence. They are not looking at a man who's about to get a dose. They are looking at a man who is taking a calculated risk. You stand up, your body a rigid, trembling thing. The quiet calm that has been your constant companion is gone, replaced by a cold, searing terror. You have seen your future. You have seen your final destination. It is not the workhouse. It is not a peaceful end. It is a slow, quiet suffocation in a filthy alleyway, with no one to mourn you and no one to remember your name. The chilling face of overdose is a mirror, and you have seen your own reflection in it. This is the last, final stage of your journey, and you have arrived. The death of Tom, a man you barely knew, is a cold, sobering reality. It is a mirror held up to your own face, and you are forced to see the truth. The long, slow descent into this personal hell has been so gradual, so hazy, that you've been blind to the true cost. But the sight of a man dead in a filthy alleyway, his face a chilling mask of peace, has shattered the illusion. The bottle is not your friend. It is a slow, patient killer. And for the first time in months, you're not just a creature of habit. You are a man who is terrified. The fear, a raw primal thing, is not just of death. It is the fear of having wasted it all. You look at your hands, not as the trembling, clumsy instruments of an addict, but as the hands of a tailor. You remember the feel of the needle, the soft, supple texture of the cloth, the quiet satisfaction of a perfect stitch. It's a memory so sharp, so clear, that it feels like a dream. You remember the small, respectable life you had, the friends, the family, the sense of purpose. It was not a perfect life. It was a life of struggle, yes, but it was a life of dignity. It was a life of your own. This is a fleeting moment of clarity, a brief, piercing glimpse of what you've lost. It is a terrible, gut-wrenching realization, a cold punch to the gut that leaves you gasping for breath. The warm, numbing tide of the laudanum has receded, leaving you with a mind that is sharp and clear and horribly awake. You're forced to confront the person you have become. A bone grubber, a shadow, a man who lives in the shadows, a ghost in the city. You have traded everything that mattered for a slow, gentle suicide, and the realization is a torment far worse than any physical withdrawal. A mainstream historical fact is that for many addicts of the Georgian era, moments of clarity, often brought on by a traumatic event or a prolonged period of sobriety, were a terrifying and often overwhelming experience. The mind, which had been in a hazy drug-induced stupor for so long, would suddenly awaken to the full horror of its situation. This sudden awareness, a kind of psychological withdrawal, was often a trigger for a deeper, more profound relapse. The pain of seeing what you have lost is often far worse than the pain of what you have. You stand up, your legs trembling. You can't stay here. You can't watch them carry Tom's body away. A quiet, unceremonious burial for a man who died in an alleyway. You're not a part of this community anymore. You're a man who has seen his future, and you have no intention of embracing it. You stumble away from the alley, your mind reeling. You're not thinking about your next dose. You're thinking about the life you lost, the person you were, and the terrible, soul-crushing waste of it all. Historians still argue whether a moment of clarity, a rock bottom as we would call it today, was a genuine catalyst for change, or simply a temporary pause in a downward spiral. For a man with no support, no money, and no prospects, a moment of clarity could be a terrifying and debilitating thing, a glimpse of a different life that was completely out of reach. The shame, the guilt, the despair, it could all be too much to bear, a weight that would simply force you to seek the oblivion of the bottle once more. A quirky tidbit is that some of the more progressive almshouses of the time, the charitable institutions that house the poor, would have a small moral ward for addicts. The idea was to give them a safe, supportive environment to reflect on their lives and find a new, more righteous path. Of course, many of these moral wards were little more than glorified prisons, with no real understanding of the nature of addiction. But the intention, at least, was a step away from the harsh moralizing of the rest of society. You are a man who has seen the light, and it is a blinding, terrifying thing. The shame is a searing brand on your soul. The guilt is a heavy, leaden weight. The fear is a cold, unblinking terror. And in the midst of it all there is a small, quiet, desperate desire. A desire to go back. To go back to the man you were, to the life you had, to the person you were before the pain, before the bottle, before the slow, quiet descent into hell. But you know, in your heart of hearts, that you can't go back. You have crossed a line, and there is no going back. The tailor, the man who had friends and dignity, is a distant, half-forgotten memory. All that remains is this broken, shivering creature. The moment of clarity is a beautiful, terrible gift, a brief glimpse of a world you have lost forever. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated suffering. It is the moment you realize the full, horrifying extent of your own destruction. And in a strange, terrible way, it is the most alive you have felt in months. This searing clarity from the night before has not faded. It is a constant, unblinking presence in your mind, a new kind of torment that has replaced the old one. The physical agony of withdrawal, the bone-deep ache, the restless torment, it all seems like a mild inconvenience compared to the horrifying truth of your own self-destruction. The death of Tom, a ghost in an alleyway, was not just a grim moment of your life. It was the final, unassailable proof of your own ruin. You're a man who has no home, no money, and no future. You're a man who is living on the kindness of a grim, desperate community that is itself on the brink of collapse. You're a man whose body is a fragile, broken ruin, a testament to months of self-inflicted poison. And for the first time, you are forced to face it. You have arrived at your rock bottom. There is no lower to fall. The shame, a cold, hard lump in your stomach, is a new feeling. It is not the brief, fleeting pang of guilt you felt in your early days. It is a deep, soul-crushing shame, a kind of internal humiliation that leaves you feeling small and pathetic. You walk through the streets, not just as a ghost, but as a disgraced man. You see the people in their respectable clothes, going about their respectable lives, and you feel a searing, gut-wrenching sense of what you have lost. You were once one of them. You were once a man with a place in the world, and you have traded it all for a bottle. This is a long, winding road to rock bottom. It's not a sudden cliff you fall from. It's a slow, gentle slope that you've been gliding down for months, completely oblivious to your destination. The journey was so smooth, so comfortable, that you never saw the danger. You thought you were just taking a brief detour. You thought you could always turn back. But you were wrong. The path you're on is a one-way street, and the end of it is right in front of you. A mainstream historical fact about addiction in the Georgian era is that the concept of rock bottom, a moment of complete and utter failure that could serve as a catalyst for change, was not a part of the public consciousness. Addiction was seen as a character flaw, and a man who had fallen so low was seen as a lost cause. There were no support groups, no treatment centres, and no understanding of the disease of addiction. For many, rock bottom was not a moment of potential change, but a final, irreversible destination. You feel a new, terrifying kind of desperation. It is not the desperation for your next dose. It is the desperation to change, to do something, anything, to turn this long, slow slide around. You have nothing left to lose, and in a strange, terrible way, that is a kind of freedom. You're no longer bound by your reputation, by your home, by your possessions. You are a man with nothing, and a man with nothing can do anything. But what can you do? The world you once inhabited is a closed door. The skills you once had are long gone. The body you once relied on is a broken, shivering ruin. Historians still argue whether the extreme shame and social isolation of the era, which pushed addicts to their lowest point, was a necessary evil that could, in a rare few cases, be a catalyst for change, or if it was simply a cruel and inhumane system that only guaranteed a man's ruin. It was a world that offered no second chances, a world that was utterly blind to the possibility of redemption. A quirky tidbit is that some of the more progressive medical thinkers of the time, often inspired by travellers' tales from the East, would theorise about the possibility of a spiritual awakening as a cure for addiction. The idea was that a man who was utterly broken by his habit could, through some kind of divine intervention or moment of profound realization, be born again. His addiction, a distant, ugly memory. It was a fringe theory, a kind of wishful thinking in a world that had no answers, but it was a small glimmer of hope in a sea of despair. You're not a man who has had a spiritual awakening. You're a man who has just woken up, and what you see is a horror. You have a terrible choice to make. You can find a way to get your next dose, to return to the quiet, hazy numbness that has been your constant companion. Or you can sit here, in the cold, and feel every single ounce of the pain. You can feel the shame, the guilt, the regret, the despair. You can feel the cold and the hunger. You can feel the ghost of the man you once were, and the terrible, horrifying reality of the man you have become. You're a man on a long winding road, and you have reached the end. The question is not where you go from here, but whether you can take a single step forward into a new kind of existence. This is your rock bottom, and the only thing you have left is a single terrifying truth. You are not a ghost. You're not a creature of habit. You're a human being, and you are hurting. And in that simple, terrible reality, there is a small, quiet, desperate kind of hope. The raw, unbuffered pain of your rock bottom has not subsided. It is a constant nagging presence, a low, thrumming hum of agony and regret. You're not a man who has been cured. You're a man who has been broken, and you're left to pick up the pieces. There is no joyous rebirth, no sudden moment of clarity that washes away all the past. There is only this new, terrible reality. You're a man who is sober, and it is a horrifying, unfamiliar feeling. The world outside your tiny, squalid room is still the same. The streets are still filled with the noise and the stench of Georgian London. The Bow Street runners are still patrolling. The workhouse is still a cold, looming spectre on the horizon. But something has shifted inside you. The quiet, desperate scramble for your next dose, the all-consuming hunger that has defined your every waking moment, has been replaced by a quiet, gnawing uncertainty. What now? You feel the cold, the hunger, and the pain, not as a reason to seek oblivion, but as a reason to live. It is a strange paradoxical thought, but it is the truth. The pain is a reminder that you are still alive. The hunger is a reminder that you are still a living, breathing thing that needs to be fed. You're not a ghost anymore. You're a man who is hurting, and that, in a strange, terrible way, is a kind of hope. A mainstream historical fact is that for the rare few who managed to get sober in this era, the journey was an incredibly difficult one. There was no real medical or psychological understanding of the disease of addiction, and a man who'd been a ghost for so long had no one to turn to for help. The journey to recovery was not a path to be walked. It was a wilderness to be survived. For a man who had lost everything, a return to a life of dignity was not a certainty. It was a miracle. You stumble out of your room, not with a destination in mind, but with a purpose. You're not looking for a dose. You're looking for a job, a small, simple job that will earn you a few coins for a piece of bread. You are a man who has to relearn how to live. You have to relearn how to walk, how to talk, how to look people in the eye. The shame is a heavy weight, but you are a man who has carried heavier things. Historians still argue whether the extreme willpower and resilience required for a man to recover from addiction in this period was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, or a testament to the sheer, brutal, unforgiving nature of the society. A man who wanted to get better had to do it alone, in a world that offered him no quarter and no help. It was a battle against the self, and a battle against the world, and for most, it was a battle that was lost. A quirky tidbit from the era is that some of the more progressive Quaker communities, often with their own moral and social codes, would take in recovering addicts, not as a form of charity, but as a form of social responsibility. They would give them work, shelter, and a kind of quiet spiritual support. It was a small, quiet, and often overlooked act of compassion in a world that was blind to the suffering of the poor. You don't have a Quaker community to turn to. You are still alone in this city. You are still a man with nothing. But you are a man with a new kind of purpose. You are a man who is trying to live. You walk past the place where Tom died, and you feel a jolt of pain, a reminder of the fragility of your new life. But you do not turn away. You walk past it with your head held high, a small, sad, and very determined kind of man. You're not a man who has been saved. You're a man who has been given a choice. The choice is not between life and death. The choice is between living and simply existing. You are a man who has to face every day, every moment, every painful memory, and every gnawing hunger. You are a man who has to live without the warm, numbing tide of a bottle. And for the first time in a long time, you are ready to try. The uncertain dawn of a new day is a terrifying thing, but it is also a beautiful one. You are a man who has been given a second chance, and you will not waste it.